Hey, I'm Dr. Terrence Espinosa. This video will cover the pronunciation of the Hebrew Alefbet. Those are the consonants of the Hebrew alphabet. There's a separate video for vowels. Vowels were always spoken, but they weren't always written. They're treated as a separate part of the alphabet. So there's a separate video for that. This will cover the consonants. And let's talk about the big picture view, first of all, of the consonants. There you have it. That's the 23 consonants, the Hebrew alphabet. 22 traditionally, there's a pair at the end that were doubled with just slight variation. We'll get into that when we get there. Let me tell you how to read this overview chart. This is how I think of the alphabet when I think of the Hebrew alphabet. You read it right to left, and of the 3 rows you see, only the middle row is complete. That's your Hebrew alphabet proper. Those are the consonants to focus on. There are variations on certain letters. So the top row represents a particular kind of variation. This is where you put a dot inside of these 6 letters. And originally, it made those 6 letters make a different sound. The dot was called a dagesh. The sound was more of a plosive sound. So for example, if you look all the way on the right side of your screen, the first letter is just the letter by itself in the middle row. The second letter from the right has a middle row version and a version on top of it. That's called a bet. And so the top row with the dot, you pronounce as a ba. And when you say ba, go ahead and pronounce ba with me, ba. Your lips come together and you have this mild explosive expulsion of air, ba, ba. And that's what these dots do on these 6 letters, is they make you pronounce it with that mild explosion of air, this plosive sound. Without the dot, you'd have more of, they call it a fricative, where your lips don't touch, the air passes through. There's some friction as it comes through. So for example, ba is with the dot. Without the dot, you would say va, va. It's very similar. It's just that your lips don't touch, and you have some kind of friction in the air as you make the sound. So va versus ba. Now, originally, all 6 letters did something like that, and there's a different plosive or fricative sound. For those, we only recognize 3 today. In modern Hebrew, only recognize 3. And because of that, only 3 of the dotted variations will appear in the following slides. But originally, all 6 had a sound, and all 6 were grouped together in a special category we call the gad kafak. That's the sound those letters make if you throw some vowels in between them. The bottom row is the final form. So there are 5 letters in Hebrew that have a final form. It's called sofit, so the sofit form in Hebrew. So kaf, sofit, for example, kaf is a letter, and it's right just about in the middle of your screen. If you're looking on the bottom row, it looks like a right angle, and it's center right of your screen on the bottom row. That's the final form of that letter, and that's because when that letter was the last letter of a word, it would use the final form to indicate that's where the word stops. So help break up the reading. And why these 5? That's a question for another day, another time. And it's just sometimes languages pick, and these are the letters that were chosen for a final form of those letters. So that's the big picture view. This is what you would memorize. You'd work from all of this if you were taking a Hebrew class and really work on the alphabet. And so we're going to talk about the middle row, mostly the letters that we would say as we sing the Hebrew alphabet, or whatever you do to practice the alphabet. So the first letter is an aleph. It looks like an X, but it's not. The one of the crossbars doesn't quite meet in the middle. And this is a silent letter. It doesn't make a sound. Whatever sound originally made is lost to us, so we don't make a sound, and we call it a silent letter, and it's aleph. Bet, ba, bet makes a B sound, ba. And that's the first one we talked about earlier. The other version of it is vet, vet, vet. So aleph, bet, vet is the first 3 sounds you'd make as you're learning the Hebrew alphabet. Gimel, gimel. Gimel is how we say it sometimes, but gimel is probably the more proper way because eyes make E sounds in Hebrew. This makes a G sound, G, gimel. Dalet is next. Dalet, dalet. It's a right angle. The difference of this and the final form we looked at the beginning of the video is this dalet stays within the lines, the handwriting lines. You imagine the top line and bottom line. The dalet is entirely contained in the top and bottom handwriting lines. The final form, as we'll see in a little bit, that would continue the vertical stroke all the way down. There's another video as well on the handwriting of Hebrew, so you can see a little better how these would be spaced out when you handwrite them. So dalet is that letter. Next is hey, hey. There's a hey, looks like a square with no floor, and there's a little window on the left side. That's important for this letter. There's a similar looking letter that lacks the window, and it's pronounced differently. So this is a hey, makes an H sound, hey. That's the sound that letter makes. Vav is next, the great Vav Wow debate. You have two schools of thought, modern Hebrew, and a lot of us who learned classical Hebrew pronounce it as a Vav. The arguably more technically correct way would be to pronounce this as a wow is how you'd say it. And a lot of grammars are coming back to that as well. And so you have two schools of thought, and you can pick whatever you want to say, Vav or wow. Just be consistent. I'll say Vav. In my classes, you can say whatever you want as long as you're consistent with this letter. Zayin is sometimes how we say it, but zayin makes a z sound, zayin. All right, chet. This is that letter that looks like the other one with no window. So chet is it's a box with no floor, and this is a guttural. So you would really emphasize chet. And it's sometimes written as a ch in English. It's transliterated as a ch, but it's not pronounced cha, it's pronounced cha. So ch as in the word Loch, like the Loch Ness Monster or Johann Sebastian Bach, that kind of ch. So it's a guttural chet. Yeah, that's that letter. It's a very distinctive sounding letter, and I'll stop pronouncing it for you on mic, but that's how it sounds, and it's a great letter. Hanukkah. Hanukkah is sometimes in English written with a ch. It's not Chanukah, it's Hanukkah. Hanukkah. Just remember the ch in the transliteration of Hanukkah is making a guttural sound. All right, tet is next. Tet. Yod. Yud is how some pronunciation schemes work, but yod is how I say it. It's how I learned it. Makes a Y sound, yod. This is the smallest letter in the Hebrew consonantal text. If you imagine a quadrant for where you'd write your letters, this would only fill up the top right quadrant. So it is by far the smallest consonant there is in Hebrew. Kaf is next. Kaf. This is one of the letters that makes two different sounds without the dot, without the dogish. You might say kaf, KH. It's not quite the full-blown chet of the chet letter, even though the mnemonic is the same. And this is another thing where it just depends on the group you're learning with. Some or many modern Hebrew speakers will say this as a chaf. I learned it more as a hard K. You may learn it that way as well. But for us, for now, we'll say chaf. So this version with a dot, kaf. The next one is chaf. Slight guttural. This is the final form. This is a letter that looks like the earlier dalet, but it's not. This is the final form of the kaf, or kaf sofit, you might say in Hebrew. It just means final form or final kaf. This is a right angle, and the vertical line would extend below the handwriting line. That's how you recognize a final kaf. There's usually those two dots inside there, not always, but usually. And so that's how we memorize the form of final kaf. Lamed, lamed. Now, you can pronounce this however you pronounce your L's. Sometimes my L's sound like this, la. Other times they sound like la. And whatever languages are influential in your life will certainly influence how you pronounce your L's. So however you do it, make that consistent and you'll be fine. No one will hassle you for how you pronounce your L's. Lamed is this one. Mem is next. Mem. Pretty straightforward. Final mem has a final form. The final form looks like a box. If you're handwriting it, it's just a square. If you are writing it in a more calligraphic style, you'll have that little swoop on the top left corner. It also makes an M sound. The final forms don't change pronunciation. So regular mem, final mem sofit, Same sound, same letter, just different form. Noon is next. Noon. This is a skinny letter. It looks like a square bracket with the top bracket bent open a little bit. That's your noon. It has a final form, which looks like another letter. But again, the difference here is the final form of the noon will extend below the handwriting line, whereas the other letter, Vav and Zayin once in a while, gets confused for this. They won't extend below the handwriting line. So that's the easy way to tell a final noon from other letters. This is it goes deeper into the ground of your handwriting. Somic. Somic. Makes an S sound, and if you're handwriting, it looks like a circle. You don't always have to have a little ledge in the top left corner. You can if you want. The difference of this and the final mem is the somic is a circle and the final mem is a square. All right, mem, somic. Next is ayin, the other silent letter, which does make a very guttural sound that I can't do. I've heard it. It's just not a sound I can make in many grammars, all the ones I've read. They recognize there's a sound it made at one point and it's still pronounced that way in some parts of the world, but we just call it a silent letter because it's not a sound that many people who learn Hebrew as a second language really make and make well. So it's a silent letter for all our purposes today. Pay. This is another one where the dot makes this difference in sound. With the dot with the doggish in the middle, it's called pay. Pay. Without it, fay makes an F sound. So F to P. Pay. Fay. Now, fay also has a final form, and the vertical line, again, like many of the others, will extend below your handwriting line. And it's often, we call it pay when it's a final form. Tzade. Tzade is next. TS. As in the word hats, that's the sound that tzade makes. Tzade. Tzade has a final form as well, and you can guess once more, the vertical stroke goes all the way down below your handwriting line, and that's how you recognize this is a final form of tzade. So the normal form that isn't final form, that's a little more angular with the left brush stroke there. That's how you can recognize a tzade from, say, an ayin. The final form, that line just gets straightened out and it goes below the handwriting line. So tzade. Kof. Kof makes a hard K sound. It's spelled with a Q when you transliterate the name in English, but it's not qua. Many English speakers, we want to pronounce Qs like quas. It's not that. It's still kof. Kof. The form, there's a very strong no touching zone between that vertical line and the rounded part, and that's just how it's formed. If you make the letters join, we can still probably recognize what you're writing. It won't be such a big deal, but it does hover like that around the two brush strokes. So kof. Resh or resh. This one looks like a right angle, but it's rounded. The dalet from earlier is has a sharp 90-degree angle on the top right corner. So your resh is rounded. That's how you remember the resh from the dalet. Now the other thing, again, like the L, the R is pronounced differently, at least among the languages I'm familiar with. So the American R, that's a sound we make where you kind of open your throat and pull your tongue back, and it's a sound that is not always easy to pronounce. That's how we do it. Doesn't mean that's how it was done originally in Hebrew. In fact, Hebrew speakers today will pronounce this more like a reish. It's more in the back of your throat, in the soft palate area towards the back. So you can say resh, resh if you want. If you have a tapped R or a trilled R, say you're speaking London-style English, or maybe you're speaking Spanish, that's fine too, resh. Whatever works for you, just be consistent with your R's. And I just, from the way I grew up, I tend to pronounce resh like a ra, resh. But whatever works will work for you. The next letter is sin. It looks like a trident, top of a trident, and there's a dot on the left side, and that dot is very important because sin has a near twin, which looks like this, and we call it sheen. Same letter, dots on the right side. Now, this letter was originally one letter with no dot, and then there was a regional variation in how it was pronounced. Eventually, we just said, fine, there's two letters. So if you're looking at the Hebrew acrostics in the Bible, some of the Psalms, for example, they won't have two spots, one for a scene, one for a sheen. They'll have just one spot, either a line or a stanza, using one of these letters. But when we learn it today, we recognize it as two letters. So if you ask how many letters there are in the Hebrew Alefbet, if you mean the consonants, there are 22, originally 23. Today is what we memorize. Seen and sheen would be the difference there. And then the question is, are there letters that make different sounds? Because bet and vet can be treated as two letters, or they're classically one letter. And so it just depends on what you're asking when you ask how many letters there are in the Hebrew Alefbet. Nevertheless, that brings us then to our last letter, tav. Tav. Looks like a house with no floor. The difference from this and the he and the chet is the wall on the left side has that little foot. Sometimes it's handwritten more like a hook. However you write your hook there, that little flourish at the end is part of the tav. If you don't have that, you've written a chet. So tav, I think of it as tapping its toes, like a tap dancer or someone who's impatiently waiting for something, and that little toe there that's tapping, the foot that's tapping, that's the distinguishing mark of your tav. So one more time, big picture, Hebrew Alefbet, the middle row, those are the letters to focus on. Read with me, right to left. We'll go at a moderate speed. Aleph is it looks like an X, but it's not an X, it's an Aleph. And we'll start there and read from the right to the left. Ready? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Tzadeh, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tav. Now, I was just reading the middle row only, and there are some issues if you're listening to a Hebrew song. The best one I recommend is Debbie Friedman. It's a wonderful song to help you learn the alphabet. It can be maybe something you put on headphones if roommates around, or not. They can learn the alphabet as well. And so they would say in that song, and many songs, you would say alef, bet, vet. So you focus in the middle row here, but for the three letters where the dot makes a different sound, you'll include that as you read across. So if you were pointing at the letters, just point at the first three, you'd say aleph, point to the aleph there. Bet, that's the letter on the top row. Vet is back to your middle row. So you go aleph, bet, vet, gimel, dalet, hey. You can ignore the dotted versions of those because they don't make a different sound in the way we pronounce it today. So aleph, bet, vet, gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin, chet, tet, yod, or yud is how the song pronounces it. Kaf, that's the top row. Chaf is back to the middle row. Then they'll say lamed, mem, nun, samek, ayin, pei, fe. So top row for pei, middle row for fe, and then tzadeh, kuf, resh, sin, shin, tav. That's how you'd sing it. That's how you'd use this chart if you're watching this as you sing the song. And that's Hebrew Alefbet. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again later.